In 1970, one income was enough. One job, one house, one car. A family could survive, even thrive. Pause. Today, two incomes aren't enough. Three jobs still feel risky. And the American middle class is quietly dying. But this is not an accident. This is not bad luck. And this is not your fault. This is the real reason why the US middle class is disappearing. What middle class used to mean. Narrator. The middle class was never about luxury. It meant owning a modest home, stable job, healthcare, college for kids, retirement someday. In the 1950s-80s, productivity increased, wages increased, cost of living stayed reasonable. America promised something simple. If you work hard, life gets better. That promise is now broken. Wages stopped, costs exploded. Wages adjusted for inflation. Real wages have barely moved in 40 years. Productivity went up. Corporate profits went up. CEO pay went up. But worker pay, flat. Narrator. Americans are working harder, not earning more, and paying far more. Cost of living. Let's talk numbers. Housing plus 300%. College tuition plus 400%. Healthcare plus 250%. Childcare plus 200%. Meanwhile, salaries almost the same. This math does not work. Housing the biggest wealth killer. Narrator. Housing used to build middle-class wealth. Now it destroys it. Why? Wall Street bought single-family homes. Supply stayed limited. Zoning laws blocked new builds. Interest rates crushed buyers. Result: rent eats 40–60% of income. Home ownership is delayed or impossible. If you don't own property, you don't build wealth. And without wealth, the middle class collapses. Debt trap, credit cards, student loans. Narrator. Debt is the new middle class. Student loans. Degrees promised opportunity. Delivered lifelong payments. Credit cards. Used for survival, not luxury. Groceries, gas, rent. Medical debt. One accident can bankrupt you. Truth. The system doesn't want you rich. It wants you paying forever. This cycle of debt isn't just a series of bad financial moves by individuals. It is a structural shift in how the economy functions. To understand the debt trap, you have to look at how the nature of the American dollar changed. 1. The death of the savings economy. In the mid-20th century, the US had a production-based economy. Interest rates were high enough that if you put money in a savings account, it actually grew. Debt was seen as a temporary tool to buy a home or a car. Today, we have a debt-based economy. Because wages have stagnated, as we discussed earlier, the only way to maintain a middle-class lifestyle, or even just to survive, is through credit. Why the trap is structural. The interest gap. While your wages might grow at to 3% a year, credit card interest rates often sit at 20–25%. Mathematically, once you fall behind, it becomes a permanent tether. Credential inflation. A high school visa should be a ticket to the middle class. Now, a degree is the entry fee. Because the cost of that degree has risen 1,200% since 1980. Young people start their productive lives with a negative net worth. 2. The survival squeeze. The narrator in your script points out a crucial truth: credit cards are now used for survival. In the 1970s, revolving debt was largely for discretionary spending. Today, millions of Americans use credit to bridge the gap between their paycheck and the rising cost of inelastic goods, things you can't choose not to buy. Groceries. Food inflation has hit record highs. Energy, heating, and gasoline prices are volatile. Medical care. Unlike annuity, you cannot opt out of a broken leg or a chronic illness. 3. The end goal readier capitalism. The real reason the middle class is disappearing is the shift toward a readier model. In this system, wealth isn't created by making things. It's extracted by owning things and charging others to use them. You rent your home from a corporation. You rent your transportation via high-interest car loans. You rent your education via student loans. You rent your basic survival via credit card interest. When you own nothing and owe everything, you aren't a member of the middle class. You are a debt service are for the top 1%. Jobs are less secure than ever. Automation and AI. White-collar jobs at risk. Stable careers disappearing. Gig economy. No benefits. No security. No future. Corporate loyalty is dead. Companies lay off workers. Buy back stock. Reward executives. Workers replaceable. Disposable. 1. The productivity pay gap. In the 1970s, the engine broke. Before 1971, as workers became more efficient productivity, their pay rose in lockstep. After 1971, productivity continued to skyrocket thanks to computers and automation, but wages flatlined. The result, the wealth created by your hard work stopped going into your paycheck and started going into corporate profits and executive bonuses. 2. The scissors of inflation. Middle-class life didn't just get more expensive. It became a trap because of relative inflation. Cheap luxuries, TVs, clothes, and toys became incredibly cheap. This creates an illusion of wealth. Expensive foundations, the big three housing, healthcare, and education became massive wealth killers. You can afford a $500 iPhone, but you can't afford a $500,000 starter home. This is the hallmark of the modern middle-class struggle. 3. Financialization and the rent-seeker economy. The economy shifted from making things to owning things and charging rent. Institutional buying. Large corporations now buy up thousands of single-family homes, outbidding families to turn them into permanent rentals. The debt engine. When wages don't cover the cost of living, people use debt, credit cards, student loans to survive. This turns the middle class into a source of interest income for the banking sector. You aren't building equity, you're servicing a loan. 4. The end of stability. The final piece of the puzzle is the death of the career. An automation technology is now moving up the value chain, threatening white-collar jobs that were once considered safe. The gig economy. Companies have shifted the risk from themselves to the worker. You provide the car, the health insurance, and the retirement savings. They provide the app. In the 1970s, a job was a social contract. Today, it is increasingly an access fee. 1. The AI middle management squeeze. We are entering a phase where AI doesn't just replace manual labor. It replaces the middle-class desk job. The prediction: by 2026, experts predict that up to 20% of organizations will use AI to eliminate more than half of their current middle management roles. The tsunami. The IMF recently warned that 60% of jobs in advanced economies are exposed to AI disruption. This isn't just automation, it's the systematic removal of the ladder rungs that young people once used to climb into the middle class. 2. The gig economy as a safety net trap. The gig economy. Uber, DoorDash, Upwork is often sold as flexibility. In reality, it is often a necessity born of a weak labor market. The volatility: over 40% of gig workers earn less than $15,000 per year. The risk shift in the old model. The company paid for your health insurance, your payroll tax, and your equipment. In the gig model, you pay for the car, the gas, the insurance, and the maintenance, while the employer, the app, takes a 20 to 30% cut of every dollar. 3. The death of corporate loyalty. For decades, The mantra was people are our greatest asset. Today, financial metrics tell a different story. Stock buybacks, instead of reinvesting profits into worker wages or R&D. Companies spent trillions over the last decade buying back their own stock to inflate executive bonuses. The disposable sentiment in 2026. Employee engagement has fallen to a global low of 21%. Workers feel like a line item to be deleted during the next quarterly earnings call, leading to the rise of quiet quitting and realism over optimism. Tax system and corporate power. Narrator. The middle class pays the most. Payroll taxes, income taxes, sales taxes. Meanwhile, billionaires use loopholes. Corporations avoid taxes. Wealth compounds at the top. This is not capitalism. This is extraction. The regressive reality. While income tax is technically progressive the more you earn, the higher the rate, the total effective tax rate often tells a different story. The W to trap middle class income mostly comes from W-2 wages, which are taxed immediately through payroll and income taxes. There is no escaping these. The billionaire discount for the ultra-wealthy. Income doesn't come from a paycheck. It comes from assets, stocks, real estate. By using a strategy known as buy, borrow, die, they can live off loans taken out against their assets, money that is not considered taxable income while their wealth compounds tax-free. 2. Corporate tax avoidance and profit shifting. Large multinational corporations have access to a global menu of tax rates. The shell game through profit shifting. Companies can earn their money in high-tax countries like the US but legally move those profits to low-tax jurisdictions, tax havens. The cost to you when corporations avoid paying their share. The burden to fund infrastructure, schools, and the military shifts to the only group that can't move their money, you. This is the extraction your narrator mentions. 3. Capital versus labor. The US tax code fundamentally values money more than work. Labor is taxed high. The top marginal rate on wages is roughly 37%. Wealth is taxed low. Long-term capital gains, the profit from selling stocks or property, are capped at 20%. Mathematically, this means a hedge fund manager often pays a lower percentage of their income in taxes than a nurse or a teacher. 1. The buy, borrow, die strategy. This is the ultimate loophole. For a billionaire, selling stock to get cash is a rookie mistake because it triggers a tax bill. Instead, they use this three-step cycle. Buy, they acquire massive amounts of appreciating assets, stocks, real estate, art. Borrow, instead of selling those assets, they take out low-interest loans using the assets as collateral. Since a loan is an income, it is 100% tax-free. They use this and axe cash to fund their lives. Die, when they pass away, the cost basis of the assets resets the step-up in basis. Their heirs can sell the assets to pay off the loans without ever paying a dime in capital gains tax on decades of growth. The contrast: you pay taxes before you see your paycheck. They spend their wealth without ever triggering a tax event. 2. Corporate profit shifting. Corporations use a global shell game to ensure their taxable profits only show up in places with little to no taxes. The royalty trick: a company like Nike or Apple might register its logo or patents in a tax haven like Bermuda or Ireland. The US branch of the company then pays billions in royalties to its own offshore branch to use its own logo. The result: on paper, the US branch made $0 profit because it spent it all on royalties. So it pays $0 in US corporate tax. The profit is shifted to the tax haven where it's untaxed. 3. The compounding divide. Wealth at the top doesn't just grow. It compounds through a different set of assets than middle-class wealth. This system creates a diagonal society where material inheritance and tax shielding have replaced hard work as the primary driver of wealth. By 2026, the top 1% of households own over 40% of all stocks, while the middle class's primary asset, home equity, is being eroded by rising costs and institutional buyers. Psychological damage. Narrator. The disappearance of the middle class isn't just financial. It's mental. Anxiety, burnout, depression, hopelessness. People feel, no matter how hard I work, I fall behind. That feeling destroys societies. 1. The death of the future horizon. Psychologically, humans need a sense of progress to maintain mental health. The hedonic treadmill versus the broken escalator in a healthy economy. You feel like you are moving forward. Today, many feel they are on an escalator moving downward. No matter how fast you run up, get a promotion, take a second job, you stay in the same place. Delayed adulthood because housing and stability are out of reach. Milestones like marriage, having children, or moving out are being delayed indefinitely. This leads to a permanent adolescence that breeds deep resentment and a loss of identity. 2. Decision fatigue and scarcity brain. Living on the edge of financial ruin changes how the brain functions. Cognitive load. When you are constantly calculating if you can afford groceries after the electric bill, your brain is in a state of high cognitive load. Studies show that the stress of poverty can effectively lower a person's functional IQ by 13 points. Cortisol overload. Chronic financial anxiety keeps the body in a fight or flight state. This leads to burnout, where the brain's emotional regulation center shut down, leading to the numbness and hopelessness mentioned in your script. 3. The erosion of social cohesion. When the middle class disappears, the social glue of a country dissolves. The zero-sum mentality in a growing middle class. Your success is my success. In a shrinking one, your gain must be my loss. This leads to increased political polarization, tribalism, and a lack of trust in neighbors and institutions. Learned helplessness. When people realize that the rules of the game are rigged as seen in the tax and corporate power sections, they stop trying to play by the rules. This is where societal decay begins. Crime increases, civic engagement drops, and a general sense of why bother takes over. The core truth: you cannot have a stable democracy without a stable middle class, because a stable middle class is the only group with enough skin in the game to care about the long-term future. 1. The American dream versus reality. In the U.S., identity is tied to home ownership. This is the forced savings vehicle that built the American middle class after the supply squeeze since the 2008 crash. The U.S. has chronically underbuilt housing. We are currently short roughly 4 to 7 million homes. The NIMBY, not in my backyard effect. Local zoning laws in the US often ban the building of smaller, affordable starter homes or duplexes, forcing prices up and keeping younger workers out of the wealth-building game. 2. The privatized safety net. Unlike other developed nations, the US ties basic survival to employment, health insurance, because healthcare is tied to your job. Losing a job isn't just a loss of income, it's a loss of safety. This creates job lock, where people are too afraid to start businesses or switch careers, stifling the very innovation America is known for. The education toll in the U.S. Student debt is now the second largest category of household debt, $1.7 trillion. This acts as a tax on upward mobility that doesn't exist to the same degree in Europe or Asia. 3. The 1971 Nixon shock and the petrodollar. As we touched on earlier, 1971 was the year the US dollar stopped being money and started being credit, exporting inflation because the US dollar is the world's reserve currency. The US can print more money than other countries. However, this money enters the system through banks and asset owners first. By the time it reaches the average worker's paycheck, prices have already risen. The financialization of everything in 1970. The financial sector accounted for about 10% of corporate profits. History shows middle classes don't disappear quietly. Pressure builds. Systems change or break. America is at that moment. 1. The safety valve reform. This is when a system realizes it is about to break and chooses to redistribute power to save itself. The Gilded Age example in the late 1800s. The U.S. had extreme inequality similar to today. The safety valve was the Progressive Era and later the New Deal. The government introduced child labor laws, the 40-hour work week, and Social Security. The modern version, this would look like radical housing reform ending corporate ownership of single-family homes, tax code overhauls taxing capital gains like income, and universal access to foundations like healthcare. 2. The pressure burst collapse or revolution. When a system refuses to bend, it eventually snaps. History shows that when the middle class is hollowed out, societies often pivot toward populism or authoritarianism. The mechanism: people who feel they have no stake in the current system stop caring if that system survives. This leads to the burn-it-down mentality. Historical parallel: the French Revolution was not just about the poor. It was driven by a frustrated third estate, the merchant middle class, that had economic power but no political voice and was being crushed by taxes that the nobility didn't have to pay. 3. The slow fade: feudalism 2.0. If the system doesn't break or reform, it settles into a permanent underclass model. Subscription serfdom: in this scenario, the majority of the population becomes permanent renters. You rent your home from a hedge fund, you rent your car from a subscription service, and you rent your software and tools. The result: upward mobility stops. Wealth becomes entirely hereditary. This leads to a stagnant, low innovation economy because the dreamers are too busy working 3 jobs to pay interest to the owners. Why America is at that moment. America is currently experiencing elite overproduction. This is a theory by Peter Turch that suggests when it is too many people competing for the top but there aren't enough middle-class spots left. The competition turns into a civil war between elites, while the middle class becomes the fuel for the fire. The moment of truth is here because the tools used to mask the decline, like credit card debt and to income households, have reached their mathematical limit. We have reached the point where the cost of living simply exceeds the value of labor. The betrayal of the meritocratic promise. In a healthy society, people believe in a social contract: if I work hard and follow the rules, I will thrive. The break: when a generation realizes that even with 2 degrees and 2 jobs they cannot afford a home. They stop believing the rules are fair. The consequence: this is what led to the French Revolution and the rise of radical movements in 1930s Europe. It wasn't just poverty, it was the betrayal of the middle class's expectations. 2. The rise of elite overproduction. This is a chilling historical pattern. As the middle class shrinks, more people try to squeeze into the top 1%. The friction: when there are too many elites or people who feel they should be elites and not enough spots at the top. They begin to fight each other. The result: they use the frustrated middle and lower classes as fuel for their wars. This leads to the extreme polarization we see in 2026. 3. The choice: reform or ruin. History gives us 2 main paths for a country at this crossroads. Path of the New Deal: model reform. In the 1930s, the U.S. was on the brink of collapse. To save capitalism, the system had to reform. What it took: massive taxes on the ultra-wealthy up to 90% at the peak, the creation of Social Security, and laws that forced corporations to share profits with workers. The goal: to reprime the pump and give the middle class enough wealth to become consumers again. The middle class is disappearing, not because people are lazy, but because the system changed. Understanding this matters, because once people stop believing work leads to a better life, everything changes. 1. The belief as an economic engine. In the US, the belief that work leads to a better life was the primary driver of productivity. When people believe they can own a home, they work harder, they innovate, and they invest in their communities. The shift when that belief dies, productivity becomes performative. People do the bare minimum to survive because they know the prize: home ownership. Retirement stability has been removed from the game. This is the root of the quiet quitting movement and the general sense of malaise in the 2026 workforce. 2. The danger of nothing to lose. History is very clear on this. The most dangerous person in a society is not the person who has always been poor. It is the person who was promised a middle-class life and had it taken away. The radicalization cycle: when the educated middle-class teachers, nurses, engineers can no longer afford a basic life, they lose their stake in the system. The reality: without a stake in the system, people stop supporting the institutions, banks, courts, government that protect that system. This is how awareness turns into action, often in unpredictable and volatile ways. 3. Awareness as the first step. Your script ends on reality demands awareness because the current system relies on people blaming themselves. The lie: I'm not successful because I didn't work hard enough or I bought too many lats. The awareness: I am struggling because the cost of housing has outpaced my wages by 500% and the tax code is designed to extract my income while shielding billionaire wealth. Once the middle class stops internalizing the failure and starts seeing the structural reality, the system is forced to change. Awareness is the moment the extractions stop being invisible. The final narrative arc. Through this conversation, we have mapped out the entire tragedy of the modern middle class. The origin: the 1971 decoupling of pay and productivity. The killers: institutional housing grabs and the debt trap economy. The extraction attacks and corporate system that values capital over labor. The toll: burnout, anxiety, and the death of the American dream. The crossroads: the moment where the system must either reform or face a total break. 1. The skin in the game theory. Economists argue that a healthy middle class provides stability because they have something to lose. Ownership equals peace. When you own a home, you care about the local school, the neighborhood safety, and long-term infrastructure. The shift: when we move to a renter society, people become transient. If you don't own the dirt under your feet, your psychological connection to the community weakens. This is why we see a decline in civic participation, volunteering, and local pride across the US in 2026. 2. The aspiration gap. For decades, the American economy was fueled by aspirational spending. People worked overtime because they wanted the next thing: the bigger house, the better education for their kids. The what's the point phase. We are entering a phase where the next thing is mathematically impossible for the average worker. The result: when aspiration dies, innovation stalls. If a brilliant young person realizes they will be in debt for 30 years regardless of how hard they work, they are less likely to take the risk of starting a new business. They choose safety in survival over growth. 3. The institutional trust collapse. This is perhaps the most dangerous part of the disappearing quietly narrative. In the US, our institutions, the Fed, Congress, the courts, rely on the consent of the governed. The perception of rigging: if the middle class sees that banks get bailed out in 2008, this is not fear. This is reality. And reality demands awareness.